In a world of manicured lawns and legacy admissions, a war was being fought in silence. This wasn't a battle of fists, but of minds, and it was about to get brutal. It's a classic rich girl, poor boy tale, but with a twist you will never see coming. This is the story of how a cruel lie, designed to destroy a poor student, accidentally revealed a shocking truth and an unforgettable love story. This is more than just a university drama. It's about the invisible cages we build and the courage it takes to break free. It's about a fierce academic competition that became a battle for a young man's soul. You're about to watch a brilliant scholarship student, Marvin Johnson, who was on the verge of a life-changing victory, get publicly humiliated and stripped of everything by the one person he secretly admired, Pamela Cruz, the powerful professor's daughter. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been so thoroughly misjudged that you began to doubt your own true worth? This story is a powerful reminder for every underdog that your value is not determined by the judgment of others. It's about overcoming impossible odds and the long road to redemption. Prepare for an emotional journey filled with betrayal, a stunning surprise, and a plot twist that will restore your faith in justice. The moment she sees his discarded notes is the moment everything changes, revealing a genius they tried to bury and a true love they never expected. If you believe that character is more valuable than wealth, then you've found the right place. This is more than a video, it's a statement. Show your support by commenting true worth below. Like this video to cast a vote for integrity, and make sure you subscribe and hit the bell. The finale of this romance is when you have to see to believe. The announcement echoed through the Grand University Auditorium, a place Pamela Cruz felt was practically her second home. It was for the annual Sterling Scholar Award, the university's most prestigious academic honor, and a ripple of excitement went through the crowd. But not for Pamela. She let out a soft, almost imperceptible scoff, a private little joke. For her, this whole academic competition wasn't a competition at all, it was a coronation. After all, she was the brilliant professor's daughter, wasn't she? This was her birthright. She scanned the faces of her peers, a sea of ambitious students, but her eyes were searching for just one. There he was, Marvin Johnson, the quiet kid from the back of the lecture hall, the one who always looked a little out of place. He was the university's charity case, the token scholarship student they loved to parade around. The thought that he, a poor student in a hand-me-down jacket, could even be considered a rival was, frankly, insulting. It was a laughable notion in this intense university drama. Her friends, a clique of equally privileged and entitled students, giggled beside her, already whispering their congratulations. They knew the script as well as she did. The world worked in a certain way, a hierarchy of status and wealth that had always served them well. Hard work was for people who had no other choice. For them, success was simply expected, an inheritance as certain as their trust funds. This award was just another box to check off on the list of their foregone conclusions. Pamela leaned back in her plush velvet seat, a picture of calm confidence. She'd put in a respectable amount of effort, of course, just enough to maintain appearances. But the real work? That was done by her father's name, a name that opened doors and cleared paths. She believed her victory was guaranteed, not by merit alone, but by a system designed to favor people just like her. It was a comfortable and predictable world she lived in. This whole spectacle was just a formality, a drawn-out piece of theater for the masses. The real winner had been decided long ago, in the quiet, influential conversations that happened behind closed doors. The idea of an underdog story was sweet for movies, but in the real world, the powerful always won. It was a simple, unchangeable fact of life, and she had no reason to believe this time would be any different, especially for someone like Marvin Johnson. She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile, a silent acknowledgement of her place in the food chain. This was how things were meant to be. The natural order. People like Marvin were meant to serve as a backdrop, a feel-good story of effort that ultimately fell short, reinforcing the superiority of those born to lead. It wasn't cruel in her mind, it was simply the truth. Her victory wouldn't just be a personal achievement, it would be a confirmation of that truth. Her father, Professor Cruz, sat on the stage with the other faculty members, his posture exuding an air of authority that filled the entire room. He caught her eye and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. It was all the confirmation she needed. The nod said it all. It's already yours. This entire event was less about discovering the brightest student and more about celebrating his legacy, which he was now passing down to her. On the other side of town, far from the gilded halls and legacy names, Marvin Johnson's world was a universe away. It was a cramped apartment that smelled perpetually of old books and brewing coffee, the cheap kind, the only kind he could afford. His reality wasn't one of confident smiles and guaranteed victories. It was a relentless series of late-night study sessions, fueled by sheer willpower. For this scholarship student, genius wasn't a gift, it was a lifeline, the only tool he had. His desk was a chaotic landscape of notes, half-empty mugs, and textbooks held together by tape. This was his battlefield, where he waged a silent war against the circumstances of his birth. Every complex equation he solved, every historical event he memorized, was another step away from the poverty that had shadowed his family for generations. Sleep was a luxury he rarely indulged in, a thief that stole precious hours from his quest for a different life, a truly life-changing opportunity. He didn't have a safety net. There was no influential father to make a call, no trust fund to fall back on. If he failed, that was it. The fall would be long and hard, back to a world of dead-end jobs and broken dreams. This immense pressure, which would have crushed most people, only seemed to sharpen his focus. His brilliance wasn't just academic, it was the forged steel of a survivor, a testament to his resilience in the face of hardship. Sometimes in the quietest hours before dawn, he would stare out his window at the sleeping city and wonder if it was all worth it. The exhaustion was a physical weight, a constant ache in his bones. He saw other students his age enjoying their youth, but his was a sacrifice, an investment in a future he could only dare to imagine. This was the unspoken truth of being a poor student in a rich world. You had to run twice as fast just to stay in the same place. He thought about the award not as a trophy, but as a key that could unlock a door to a new reality, one where his worth wasn't measured by his worn-out clothes or the neighborhood he came from. It was his one shot to prove that a mind from the gutter could shine just as brightly, if not brighter, than one from a mansion. This was his chance for a personal redemption, to rewrite his own story. His motivation went deeper than personal ambition. He carried the hopes of his family on his shoulders. He remembered the pride in his mother's eyes when he won the scholarship, a flicker of light in her tired face. He was doing this for them, to give them a life of comfort they had never known. That thought alone was enough to push him through another chapter, another theory, another pot of bitter, black coffee. He often reviewed his research, a truly innovative approach to quantum computing that he knew was groundbreaking. It wasn't just good, it was revolutionary. It was the culmination of years of relentless effort, a testament to his unique way of seeing the world. This project was his voice, a shout into the void of the establishment, and he just prayed that someone was actually listening to what he had to say. Pamela's life, by contrast, was a beautifully curated experience, a life of effortless grace and endless privilege. She floated through the university with an air of entitlement that was as much a part of her as her designer handbag. She genuinely believed that her status, combined with her father's powerful position on the faculty, was a golden ticket that made genuine, grueling effort an option rather than a necessity. Success for Pamela Cruz was simply the default setting. Her study sessions were less about deep, intellectual struggle and more about social gatherings. She and her friends would occupy the plushest corner of the library, their laughter echoing louder than their thoughts, confident that a few hours of light reading would be more than enough. Why would she need to lose sleep over an exam when a C for her was, in practice, worth more than an A for anyone else? This was the unspoken currency of the elite. She saw the academic competition not as a measure of intellect, but as a performance. It was about saying the right things, knowing the right people, and presenting the right image. She was a master of this game, having been trained in it her entire life. Shed learned early on that the appearance of brilliance was often more valuable than the real thing, a lesson that had served her well time and time again. This mindset created a fundamental disconnect in how she viewed the world. She saw Marvin Johnson's intense dedication not as admirable, but as pathetic. It was a sign of his desperation, his low standing. In her eyes, people who had to try that hard were clearly not meant to succeed in the first place. This rich girl, poor boy dynamic wasn't a social issue to her. It was just the natural way of the world, a simple sorting of the worthy from the unworthy. Her father had always shielded her from failure, subtly intervening to smooth over any academic bumps in the road. A poor grade on a paper might be re-evaluated, a missed deadline quietly forgiven. She'd grown so accustomed to this invisible safety net that she no longer even recognized it as a privilege. She mistook her easy path for her own innate talent, a classic case of someone born on third base thinking she'd hit a triple. She truly couldn't comprehend a life without that safety net. The idea of having only one chance, of facing complete ruin after a single failure, was as foreign to her as a budget airline. Her confidence wasn't earned through overcoming adversity. It was simply the byproduct of never having to face any. It was a hollow, brittle kind of confidence, though she was the last person who would ever realize it. So as the competition neared, she focused on her presentation, her poise, and the political game of winning favor with the judges, many of whom were her father's colleagues. She was preparing for a pageant while Marvin was preparing for war. She believed with every fiber of her being that her strategy was the smarter one, the one that truly understood how the world worked. The difference between them was never clearer than inside the classroom. In Professor Albright's advanced theoretical physics seminar, the air was thick with complex ideas and intellectual posturing. It was here that Marvin's quiet genius became impossible to ignore. While other students, including Pamela and her clique, recited textbook answers, Marvin saw the curriculum as a starting point, a question to be challenged rather than a gospel to be memorized. When Albright posed a particularly difficult question about string theory, a silence fell over the room. Pamela's friends exchanged blank stares. Pamela herself began formulating a safe, conventional answer. But before she could speak, a calm voice rose from the back. It was Marvin. He wasn't just answering the question, he was reframing it, connecting it to a new, obscure paper head read and proposing an alternative that was both brilliant and audacious. The professor was visibly impressed, a slow smile spreading across his face. He engaged Marvin in a high-level debate that left the rest of the class, Pamela included, completely lost. It was a stunning display of intellectual firepower. For a few brief moments, Marvin Johnson wasn't the poor student in the corner, he was a giant, and everyone else was sitting in his shadow. This was a side of the scholarship student they rarely got to see. This both fascinated and intensely irritated Pamela. A part of her, the small buried part that genuinely respected intelligence, was impressed. But her pride, her ego, couldn't stand it. She felt a hot flash of anger. Who was he to upstage her, to make her and her friends look like fools? Her arrogant friends reacted with predictable scorn, whispering snide remarks about him being a tryhard and a show-off. She started to see him as a threat, not just in the academic competition, but to her entire sense of identity. Her superiority was built on a foundation of being the smartest person in the room, a title she held thanks to her status. But Marvin's brilliance was authentic, raw, and undeniable. It challenged the very notion that her inherited privilege made her better, and that was a terrifying thought for her. It became a pattern. In every class they shared, Marvin would offer these insightful, challenging answers. He never did it arrogantly. In fact, he seemed almost apologetic for taking up space, for having a voice. But his ideas were so powerful they couldn't be contained. Each brilliant comment he made was another small chip in Pamela's armor of entitlement, exposing a vulnerability she didn't even know she had. She began to watch him more closely, not with admiration, but with a kind of predatory focus. She was looking for a flaw, a weakness, anything she could use to tear down this quiet, unassuming genius who was single-handedly threatening her perfectly constructed world. The university drama was becoming intensely personal for her, a silent war she was determined to win at any cost. Pamela decided to take the battle out of the classroom and into the social arena, where she knew she had the upper hand. One afternoon, in the crowded student union, she saw her chance. Marvin was standing alone, reading a notice on a bulletin board. He was wearing a faded brown corduroy jacket, clean but clearly well-worn. It was the perfect ammunition for the kind of cruel, casual warfare she excelled at. She sauntered over with her clique in tow, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "Oh, Marvin," she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I just love your jacket. Is that vintage, or did you pull it out of a lost and found box from the 70s? Her friends erupted in sycophantic laughter, their cruel giggles echoing in the large hall. It was a direct public attack designed to make him feel small and worthless. Marvin slowly turned to face her. His eyes, for a moment, showed a flicker of deep hurt, the sting of the insult hitting its mark. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the explosion. They expected him to lash out in anger or shrink away in shame. To be publicly humiliated like this was a nightmare for any student, especially one already struggling with feelings of not belonging. Pamela stood there, a smug smile on her face, waiting for the reaction she craved. But Marvin didn't give it to her. He took a slow, deliberate breath, and the hurt in his eyes was replaced by a quiet, unshakable dignity. He looked at her, not with anger, but with something closer to pity. "It was my father's," he said softly, his voice even and calm. "He wore it when he worked 2 jobs to make sure I'd have a chance to stand in a room like this one day." He then simply turned back to the bulletin board, a silent dismissal. The comeback was so simple, so profound, that it sucked all the air out of Pamela's sails. Her insult, which had seemed so clever a moment before, now just hung in the air, exposed for what it was: cheap, cruel, and pathetic. Her friends' laughter died in their throats. Several onlookers who had been smirking now looked away, ashamed. Marvin had refused to play her game, and in doing so, he had won. He had proven his true worth without raising his voice. Pamela was left standing there, momentarily speechless, a feeling she was not accustomed to. She had expected to feel powerful, but instead, she just felt ugly. His quiet dignity had been a mirror, and she did not like the reflection she saw. It was a shocking turn of events for her. She quickly recovered, of course, tossing her hair and leading her friends away with a dismissive comment, but the encounter left a crack in her perfect facade. What one word describes Marvin's response right now? Let me know in the comments below. He had shown a strength that she couldn't comprehend, a power that didn't come from money or status. It came from somewhere deeper, a place of character and integrity. And for the first time, a tiny, terrifying thought entered her mind: what if she was the one who was truly poor? As if the universe had a twisted sense of humor, the final, most heavily weighted project for the Sterling Scholar Award was announced the following week, a collaborative thesis requiring students to work in pairs. The pairings, the dean declared with a cheerful smile, would be assigned randomly to foster interdisciplinary cooperation. Pamela felt a cold dread creep up her spine. She just knew with a horrible sinking certainty what was about to happen. And then her worst fears were realized. Pamela Cruz, the Dean read from the list you will be paired with. Marvin Johnson. A collective gasp rippled through the auditorium, followed by a wave of hushed whispers. It was the most unlikely pairing imaginable, a match that seemed designed for maximum drama. The rich girl, poor boy narrative of the university was about to be put into a forced partnership. Pamela's face went pale. This couldn't be happening. Her immediate reaction was one of pure, unadulterated horror. She was supposed to work with him? The boy with the sad jacket and the charity case scholarship. She saw her guaranteed victory, her birthright, slipping through her fingers. In her mind, being paired with Marvin was an anchor, a dead weight that would drag her down to his level. She stormed out of the auditorium, ignoring Marvin's hesitant attempt to speak to her. She immediately went to her father, demanding he intervene. "You have to fix this," she pleaded, her voice trembling with rage. Pairing me with him is academic sabotage. But for the first time, her father hesitated. The pairings had been made publicly, and pulling strings now would look too obvious, too corrupt. "You'll have to make the best of it," he said, much to her fury. She was trapped, and she was furious. Her initial strategy was simple non-cooperation. At their first project meeting, she was hostile and dismissive. She made it clear she would be taking the lead and that his ideas would not be required. She assumed his research, like his clothes, would be second-rate and worthless. She planned to do the entire project herself and simply add his name at the end, the ultimate act of condescension for the poor student. Marvin, however, was patient. He brought his preliminary research to the meeting, pages of meticulously detailed notes and innovative theories that went far beyond the scope of the assignment. He tried to walk her through his initial concepts, but she cut him off at every turn, refusing to even look at his work. "He'll handle the intellectual heavy lifting," she said with a sneer. "You can—" "I don't know. Check my grammar." The arrogance was a shield for her panic. The truth was, the project was far more complex than she had anticipated, and deep down, she was intimidated. But she would rather fail spectacularly on her own terms than succeed by acknowledging that she needed help, especially from someone like Marvin Johnson. Her pride was a fortress, and she was locking herself inside it, even as the water began to rise. Weeks passed, and the deadline for the project loomed like a guillotine. Pamela's strategy of going it alone was backfiring spectacularly. The project's complexity was more than she could handle, and her own research was hitting one dead end after another. She was starting to panic, the unfamiliar feeling of impending failure gnawing at her. Her grades, her reputation, and her claim to the Sterling Scholar Award were all on the line. She was desperate. One night, alone in the library and on the verge of tears, she finally gave in. She pulled out the folder of research Marvin had tried to give her weeks ago, the one she had tossed into her bag with contempt. She opened it, fully expecting to find mediocre, uninspired work that would confirm all her prejudices. She was just going to skim it, she told herself, just to see how bad it really was. But what she found inside left her breathless. It wasn't just good, it was revolutionary. Marvin's notes were a labyrinth of brilliant, original thought. He had developed a new theoretical model that was years ahead of anything in their textbooks. The pages were filled with elegant equations and profound insights that left her own research looking like a child's, crayon drawings in comparison. It was the work of a true genius. Desperate to pass and save face, she made a fateful decision. She began to secretly incorporate his innovative research into their project. At first, she told herself she was just borrowing a few concepts to get her started. But soon, she was weaving his entire theoretical framework into the thesis, claiming his breakthroughs as her own. It felt dirty, wrong, but her fear of failure was stronger than her sense of morality. Yet, Something unexpected began to happen as she spent hours immersed in his work. As she transcribed his notes and followed his logic, she started to see the world through his eyes. She began to appreciate the sheer beauty and power of his mind. His quiet brilliance, so evident on these pages, started to slowly and methodically chip away at the mountain of prejudice she had built around him. She found herself feeling a strange new emotion, a grudging respect. It was an uncomfortable feeling, one that clashed with every arrogant belief she held. How could someone she had dismissed as a worthless underdog produce work of this caliber? The evidence was right in front of her, undeniable and profound. For the first time, she was forced to confront the possibility that her judgment of Marvin Johnson had been completely, utterly wrong. This secret collaboration, this act of academic theft, was becoming something more complex. It was an education. She was learning more from his stolen notes than she had in any lecture. The project was becoming a testament to his genius, and she was merely its curator. This realization was a quiet plot twist in her own life, the beginning of a change she never saw coming. During what was supposed to be one of their collaboration sessions, Pamela hit a wall. She was trying to apply one of Marvin's more complex theories, but couldn't grasp a key principle. She grew increasingly frustrated, muttering to herself and staring at the whiteboard with a look of utter defeat. She was so consumed by her struggle that she didn't notice Marvin watching her, his expression a mixture of patience and concern. He had known all along she was in over her head. He could have been smug. He had every right to be. He could have said, "I tried to explain this to you weeks ago," and enjoyed her humiliation. That's what she would have done. But Marvin wasn't like her. He quietly stood up, walked over to the whiteboard, and picked up a marker. "You're thinking about it in 3 dimensions," he said gently. "You have to account for a 4th theoretical dimension. Here, let me show you." He didn't mock her. He didn't belittle her. Despite all her cruelty, her public insults, and her cold dismissiveness, he kindly and patiently began to walk her through the complex theory. He broke it down into simple, understandable parts, drawing diagrams and using analogies that made the abstract concept suddenly click into place. He was a natural teacher, gifted with an empathy that made his genius accessible. Pamela was completely stunned. She just stood there, marker in hand, watching him with wide eyes. His integrity was a force of nature. He was helping her with no expectation of thanks, even though she had treated him like dirt. It was a simple act of decency, but for Pamela, it was a shocking surprise. A gesture so foreign to her own calculated world that it felt like a lightning strike to her soul. A true emotional moment. This was the moment that shattered her perception of him completely. He wasn't just smart, he was good. He possessed a depth of character she hadn't known was possible. In her world, kindness was a currency, used to get something in return. But Marvin's was unconditional. He was helping his own tormentor simply because she was struggling, a quiet act that spoke volumes about his true worth. She felt a wave of shame so powerful it almost buckled her knees. She had been stealing the work of a man who was now generously offering her his help. The contrast between her deceit and his integrity was a painful, glaring spotlight on her own character flaws. She couldn't even manage a thank you, simply nodding as he finished his explanation, her mind reeling from the revelation. Like this video as a sign of respect for Marvin's incredible character. He walked back to his seat, leaving her alone with her thoughts and a newly solved equation on the board. The silence in the room was deafening. He hadn't just helped her with a physics problem, he had held up a mirror to her soul. And for the first time, she was forced to look at the person she had become. It was a truly life-changing experience. As the day of the final competition approached, Pamela's friends noticed a change in her. She was quieter, more withdrawn, and her usual arrogant confidence had been replaced by a nervous energy. They completely misinterpreted the reason. They thought she was worried about losing to Marvin, the scholarship student. Seeking to secure her victory and curry favor, they decided to take matters into their own hands, concocting a plan that was as vicious as it was cowardly. They knew about Marvin's innovative research because Pamela, in her initial arrogance, had complained about being paired with him. They decided to use his brilliance against him. The group's ringleader, a particularly nasty student named Trent, hatched the plot. They would accuse Marvin of the one crime that is a death sentence in academia: plagiarism. It was a dirty, despicable plan, but they saw it as a necessary move in the high-stakes university drama. Their method was deceptively simple. Trent, who was a skilled programmer, hacked into the university's submission portal. He found Marvin's project, and using snippets from obscure academic journals, he digitally inserted phrases and sentences into the document's metadata, making it look like large sections had been copied and pasted. It was a sophisticated frame-up, designed to look like a clear-cut case of intellectual theft. They didn't stop there. They started a whisper campaign, spreading rumors that they had seen Marvin frantically copying work in the library. They told anyone who would listen that poor student was in over his head and was resorting to cheating to keep up. They were poisoning the well, creating a cloud of suspicion around him before the final presentation even began. It was a character assassination, a premeditated act of academic violence. They did all of this, they told themselves, for Pamela, to protect her. But in reality, they were doing it for themselves. Marvin's success was a threat to their entire worldview, the comfortable belief that they were inherently superior. If an underdog like him could win, it meant that their money and their names weren't as powerful as they thought. They weren't just trying to disqualify him, they were trying to disqualify the very idea of him. On the morning of the competition, just hours before Marvin was set to present, Trent anonymously submitted the evidence to the dean's office and, more importantly, to Professor Cruz. He attached a note filled with feigned concern, saying he couldn't stand by and watch someone cheat their way to the top. It was the final, treacherous move in their conspiracy, a perfectly timed attack designed to cause maximum damage. The trap was set. They had no idea that their actions were about to trigger a chain of events far more dramatic and consequential than they could ever have imagined. They thought they were securing a simple victory for their friend in an academic competition. Instead, they were lighting the fuse on a bomb that would blow up everything, revealing a shocking truth that would change everyone's lives forever. The evidence landed on Professor Cruz's desk like a viper. He saw the doctored proof of plagiarism and didn't hesitate for a second. His own deep-seated bias against Marvin, the boy he saw as an upstart from the wrong side of the tracks, flared to life. He had always harbored a quiet resentment for the scholarship student who so effortlessly challenged his own daughter in the classroom. This was the excuse he needed. He didn't launch an investigation. He didn't ask Marvin for his side of the story. He didn't even consider the possibility of a mistake or a frame-up. Blinded by his prejudice and his fierce, protective desire to see his daughter win, he made an instant, brutal judgment. He saw an opportunity to eliminate the only real threat to Pamela's victory, and he took it without a shred of professional integrity. His bias as a father completely eclipsed his duty as a professor. He strode into the packed auditorium where the final presentations were about to begin and walked directly onto the stage. He took the microphone, his face a mask of grim authority. "We have a deeply unfortunate announcement to make," he began, his voice booming through the silent hall. He then publicly accused Marvin Johnson of a shocking and egregious act of academic dishonesty, claiming his entire project was a fraud. Marvin, who was sitting in the front row, looked up in absolute disbelief. He tried to stand, to speak, to defend himself, but Professor Cruz cut him off. "You are disqualified from this competition," he declared, pointing a finger at the devastated young man. "And your scholarship will be placed under immediate review." It was a public execution, a brutal, swift, and utter humiliation in front of the entire university. The word humiliated wasn't strong enough to describe what Marvin felt. His world collapsed in that single horrifying moment. Everything he had worked for, every late night, every sacrifice, it was all turning to ash. He could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on him, burning with judgment and scorn. He was no longer a brilliant contender, he was a cheat, a fraud, a pariah. The shame was a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. Let's be honest, what would you have done if you were the professor? Comment below. He stumbled out of the auditorium, the whispers and stares of his peers following him like a pack of wolves. He was a gifted, honest student who had just been convicted of a crime he didn't commit, without a trial, without a voice. It was the ultimate injustice, a nightmare from which he couldn't wake up, orchestrated by the one man whose approval he had secretly sought. Pamela watched the entire scene unfold from the side of the stage, her heart pounding in her chest. A part of her felt a sickening lurch of victory, the path now completely clear. But a much larger part of her was horrified. She knew. Deep in her gut, she knew Marvin was no plagiarist. The brilliance she had seen in his notes was too original to be stolen. And a terrible, sickening thought began to form: this was a lie. This was all a terrible, terrible lie. With those 3 words, "You are disqualified," Marvin's entire future was erased. The scholarship was more than just tuition money, it was his everything. It paid for his housing, his food, his books. Without it, he couldn't even afford to stay enrolled at the university, let alone for another day. He was facing not just academic ruin, but complete and utter financial devastation. He was, in a single instant, completely and totally ruined. He walked across the campus in a daze, the world blurring around him. The accusation of plagiarism was a permanent stain, a brand on his academic record that would follow him forever. No other reputable university would accept him. No serious employer in his field would hire him. His dream of escaping poverty, of giving his family a better life, had been shattered into a million pieces. The underdog had been put down, mercilessly. He returned to his small, cramped apartment, the place that had been his sanctuary and his battlefield. Now it just felt like a cage. He looked at his wall of notes, his complex diagrams, the physical evidence of his sleepless nights and relentless hard work. It all seemed like a cruel joke now. All of it had been for nothing. He had poured his soul into his work, only to have it stolen and then used as the weapon for his own destruction. Meanwhile, back in the auditorium, the ceremony continued as if nothing had happened. The drama was over, the disruption removed. Pamela Cruz was now the sole finalist, the default winner of the Sterling Scholar Award. She stood at the side of the stage, watching as her peers offered her stiff, slightly uncomfortable congratulations. Her victory felt hollow, tainted, a prize won by forfeit rather than by merit. She was poised to accept the award he had rightfully earned. The weight of the injustice was suffocating. Marvin was the victim of a calculated conspiracy and a biased judge. Yet he was the one being punished, his life turned upside down. The system he had put all his faith and idea that hard work and brilliance would be rewarded had proven to be a complete sham. It was a brutal lesson in the cruel realities of power and privilege, a lesson that was costing him everything he had. He sat on his bed, his head in his hands, completely broken. The sheer despair was overwhelming. He had played by the rules in a game that was rigged from the start. What was the point of being brilliant if a lie was more powerful than the truth? What was the point of dreaming if the powerful could turn your dream into a nightmare whenever they chose? All hope seemed lost, a flickering candle extinguished by a cruel, indifferent wind. This was his rock bottom, the lowest point in a life that had already been a constant struggle. He was alone, accused, and abandoned, watching through a window of despair as the person who had tormented him was about to be handed his future on a silver platter. It was a false defeat so absolute, so devastating, that it felt utterly and completely final. The story, it seemed, was over. Backstage, Pamela was a wreck. She was supposed to be celebrating, but a toxic cocktail of guilt and doubt was churning in her stomach. Her father's swift, brutal disqualification of Marvin didn't feel like justice, it felt like an assassination. The memory of Marvin's facade, the shock, the devastation, the utter betrayal was seared into her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was complicit in a terrible crime, a key player in this emotional tragedy. Driven by an impulse she didn't fully understand, she slipped away from the ceremony and ran to the library, to the small study room they had been assigned. Her heart was pounding. She needed to see his notes again, to confirm the truth she already knew in her gut. As she entered the room, she saw a wastebasket overflowing with crumpled papers. Marvin, in his despair, must have thrown everything away. With trembling hands, she began to pull the discarded notes from the trash. She smoothed them out on the table, her breath catching in her throat. There it was again, his unique handwriting, his elegant equations, his revolutionary ideas. But this time, she saw something she'd missed before. In the margins, he had dated every single entry, documenting his thought process day by day, for months. It was a diary of a genius at work. This was it. This was the irrefutable proof. The dates on the notes predated the articles he was accused of plagiarizing by several months. He couldn't have copied them because when he had these ideas, the papers he allegedly stole from hadn't even been published yet. It wasn't just proof of his innocence, it was irrefutable evidence of his original, groundbreaking genius and the conspiracy against him. A shocking discovery. But then she found the final devastating piece of the puzzle. At the bottom of the pile was a printed-out draft of their final project, the one she had submitted. And tucked inside it was the final page of his handwritten notes, a page she hadn't seen before. On it, he had sketched out an idea for a commercial application of their theory, an idea so brilliant it was easily worth millions. And next to it, he had written a 5,050 partnership. For Pamela and me. That single sentence broke her. He had been planning to share everything with her. Even after all her cruelty and contempt, this generous, brilliant young man had seen her as an equal, a partner. He had intended to lift her up with him. And in return, her world had conspired to cast him down, to ruin him, to erase him completely. The guilt was no longer a churn, it was a tidal wave, and it was about to drown her. She stared at the pages, the undeniable proof of his integrity and the irrefutable evidence of the lie. She held his entire future in her hands. The path of least resistance was to do nothing. To walk back on stage, accept the award, and live with this terrible secret. But looking at his handwriting, at his generous, hopeful words, she wasn't sure she could. This was a truly life-changing moment of decision. Standing alone in that silent library room, surrounded by the wreckage of Marvin's dreams, Pamela experienced a moment of terrifying, absolute clarity. It was as if a veil had been lifted from her eyes, and for the first time, she was seeing the world as it truly was, not as she had been taught to see it. All the things she had valued her entire life, money, status, her father's approval, her social standing, suddenly seemed like cheap, hollow trinkets. She looked at the crumpled notes in her hand, the physical manifestation of Marvin's mind. In those pages was more integrity, more brilliance, and more raw human decency than she had ever witnessed in her entire privileged life. His quiet dignity in the face of her mockery, his selfless kindness when she was struggling, his intention to share his success with her, it all coalesced into a single profound truth. His character, his intelligence, his soulhood was his true worth. And what was her worth? It was derived from her father's name, her family's wealth, her designer clothes. It was all external, all borrowed, all fake. She hadn't earned any of it. She was a hollow shell, decorated in gold, while he was a diamond that had been covered in mud. In that moment, she realized that Marvin Johnson, the poor student she had looked down upon, was richer than she could ever hope to be. The rich girl, poor boy dynamic she had always believed in was a lie. He wasn't the poor one she was. She was impoverished in spirit, bankrupt in character. She had spent her life playing a rigged game and calling it a victory, while he had been playing with a handicap and was on the verge of winning it all through sheer, undeniable merit. The shame of this realization was a physical ache in her chest. This clarity was both a gift and a curse. It was a gift because it was the truth, and the truth has a power all its own. But it was a curse because it came with a terrible, heavy burden. She now knew about the injustice, the conspiracy, the profound wrong that had been committed. And that knowledge demanded a choice. She could no longer pretend to be an innocent bystander in her own life story. She thought about the trophy, the tech incubator partnership, the life of success that was waiting for her on that stage. It was everything she had ever wanted. But now it all felt like poison. Accepting that award would be the ultimate act of fraud, a lie that would curdle her soul for the rest of her life. It would mean admitting that everything she now knew to be true, Marvin's worth, and her own emptiness, was meaningless. The values she was raised with were crumbling to dust. Her father's approval suddenly seemed less important than her own self-respect. Her friends' admiration felt like the applause of fools. All that mattered now was the truth, represented by the crumpled papers in her hand. A fundamental, life-changing shift had occurred within her, a quiet revolution of the soul that would change the course of her life forever. The decision that crystallized in her mind was terrifying. It meant turning her back on everything she had ever known. Exposing the truth would mean publicly defying her father, the powerful man who had built her entire world. It would mean shattering their relationship, perhaps irrevocably. She would be accusing him not just of bias, but of a profound moral and professional failure. The man she had always looked up to would be brought low by her own hand. And it wasn't just her father. She would have to expose her own friends, the clique that had been her social armor for years. She would be branding them as cheats and liars, inviting their fury and turning herself into a social pariah overnight. The comfortable, privileged world she had inhabited would slam its doors in her face. She would be an outcast, a traitor to her class. The cost to herself would be immense. But what was the alternative? To stay silent? To walk on that stage, accept Marvin's award, and live the rest of her life as a fraud? The thought was now unbearable. The silence would be a poison she would have to swallow every single day. It would be a betrayal not just of Marvin, but of the new person she was becoming in that very moment, a person who finally understood the meaning of true worth. This was her one chance at redemption. It wasn't about saving Marvin anymore, not entirely. It was about saving herself. It was about proving that she was more than just her father's daughter, more than just a rich girl in expensive clothes. It was her opportunity to finally earn something real, to build a character of her own instead of just inheriting a reputation. This was her moment of overcoming her own worst instincts. She took a deep breath, the cold, sterile air of the library filling her lungs. She made her choice. She would do it. She would expose the truth, no matter the consequences, no matter how much it hurt, no matter what it cost her. She had to. It was the only way she could look at herself in the mirror ever again. She gathered Marvin's notes, the precious crumpled proof, and held them to her chest like a shield. Would you risk it all for the truth? Comment yes or nitrogen monoxide below. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and resolve. She was about to walk into a war she might not win, a war against her family, her friends, and the entire system that had propped her up her entire life. She was terrified, more terrified than she had ever been. But for the first time in her life, she felt truly, authentically alive. With a final determined look, she turned and walked out of the library, her steps purposeful and sure. She wasn't the same girl who had walked in. She was no longer just Pamela Cruz, the professor's daughter. She was a witness, an advocate, an agent of a truth that was about to explode into the light. The final act of this university drama was about to begin, and she was the one who was going to write it. Pamela walked back into the auditorium with an aura of purpose that silenced the whispers around her. She didn't go to her seat. She walked directly towards the stage, her eyes locked on the podium. Her father was just about to announce her name as the winner of the Sterling Scholar Award. The triumphant music had swelled. The spotlight was swinging towards her, and her name was on the tip of his tongue. And the winner, as he began, a proud, beaming smile on his face. Wait, a clear, strong voice cut through the auditorium. It was Pamela. She had stepped onto the stage right beside him, taking the second microphone. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Her father looked at her with a mixture of shock and annoyance. "Pamela, what are you doing?" he hissed under his breath, his smile faltering. She ignored him. She looked out at the sea of faces, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "I can't accept this award," she said, her words echoing in the stunned silence. "Because I didn't earn it. And there has been a terrible injustice here today." This was it. The point of no return. The plot twist was in motion, and it was going to be a shocking surprise for everyone. With the entire university watching, she confessed everything. She told them about Marvin's brilliant, original research. She told them about her own desperation and how she had secretly used his work. She then turned to her so-called friends, her voice ringing with newfound strength. "And I know that the plagiarism accusation was a lie, a vicious conspiracy to secure a victory for me that I didn't deserve." Then, she did the unthinkable. She projected the images of Marvin's dated notes onto the massive screen behind the stage. "This is Marvin Johnson's proof," she declared, her voice filled with an emotional power that captivated everyone. "These are his notes, dated months before the articles he supposedly copied from were ever published. He's not a fraud. He is a genius." The evidence was undeniable, a stunning visual indictment of the lie. The auditorium erupted into chaos. Students were gasping, professors were staring in disbelief. Her father stood beside her, his face ashen, a statue of crumbling authority. He looked at his own daughter, who had just publicly dismantled his reputation and exposed his corruption in the most dramatic way possible. She had chosen the truth over him, over everything he had given her. She had risked it all, and in doing so, she had set the truth free. It was a spectacular act of self-sabotage and simultaneously, an incredible act of courage. She had torn down her old life in a blaze of glory, but in its place, she had built something new, something real, a character forged in the fire of a difficult choice. Her journey to redemption was complete. In the aftermath of the explosion Pamela had detonated, the university administration moved with lightning speed to contain the scandal. An emergency committee was formed, the evidence was reviewed, and within an hour, the truth was officially acknowledged. Professor Cruz was suspended pending a full investigation, and Pamela's friends involved in the conspiracy were facing immediate expulsion. Justice, swift and decisive, was finally served. The dean returned to the stage, his face grim but resolute, and made another announcement. He formally rescinded Pamela's win and cleared Marvin Johnson's name of all charges, offering a profound public apology. And then, with a genuine smile, he declared Marvin the true and rightful winner of the Sterling Scholar Award. The crowd, which had been buzzing with shock, now rose to its feet in a thunderous, sustained standing ovation. Marvin was brought back to the auditorium, his face a canvas of disbelief and overwhelming emotion. He walked onto the stage in a daze and was handed the trophy he had earned. But that wasn't all. The dean also announced that the Tech Incubator Partnership, the life-changing grand prize, was his. In the span of a few hours, he had gone from complete ruin to the absolute pinnacle of success. It was the ultimate underdog victory. He gave a short, humble speech, his voice thick with emotion. thanking the committee for seeing the truth. As the applause washed over him, his eyes searched the crowd, looking for only one person. He found her standing quietly at the back of the auditorium, away from the spotlight. It was Pamela. She had not run away. She had stayed to witness the justice she had helped create. Their eyes met across the crowded room. He didn't see the arrogant, cruel girl who had tormented him. He saw a woman of incredible, unexpected courage. He saw someone who had sacrificed everything to do the right thing. In her eyes, he saw a profound, silent apology, an apology more powerful than any words could ever be. And in that moment, he finally saw her true worth as well. This was the real start of their love story. She gave him a small, watery smile, a smile of relief and deep sadness, before slipping out of the auditorium. It wasn't a Hollywood ending with a dramatic embrace, not yet. It was something more real, more complex. It was the beginning of a long road, a quiet understanding that a powerful connection had been forged between them through the fire of this incredible drama. True love often begins in the most unexpected ways. He clutched the trophy in his hand, his future secured, his name cleared. But as he looked at the door Pamela had just walked through, he knew the award wasn't the only life-changing thing he had gained that day. He had witnessed an act of profound redemption, a surprise that had altered his perception of humanity. And he had a strong feeling that his and Pamela Cruz's story was far from over. The story of Marvin and Pamela is a powerful reminder that our true worth isn't defined by our circumstances, but by our character. It teaches us that in the great academic competition of life, integrity is the only prize that truly matters, and that the path to redemption, while difficult, is always worth taking. It's a testament to the power of overcoming and finding true love in the most unexpected of places. If you also believe that kindness is a superpower and that everyone deserves a second chance, then you've found your community. This channel is a place for people who root for the underdog and celebrate the courage it takes to change. If that sounds like you, subscribe now and join a tribe that believes in the best of humanity. Now for our engagement trifecta. Help this story reach more people by doing these 3 things. Like this video to spread this message of hope and justice. Comment below with the single most emotional moment of this story for you. Was it the humiliation, the kindness, or the final confession? Share this video with one person who needs to see a story about the power of truth. And your journey with us doesn't have to end here. While you wait for our next upload, know that our channel is a treasure chest of unforgettable stories just like this one. Explore our older videos and discover other powerful journeys that will move and inspire you. To make sure you don't miss any of the incredible stories we have yet to tell, activate that notification bell. You won't want to be left out of the next shocking surprise or life-changing adventure. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.